Chapter 1. I cracked a crusted eyelid open and looked up at the golden dawn. The breeze whipped my hair around my face, but I was warm and safe cuddled up beside Raolcan. Good, you're awake. I stretched and tried to sit up, but something heavy was on my lap. Leng sprawled against me, asleep or passed out, I didn't know which. I'd managed to get some of the medicine down him when we landed, which wasn't actually all that long ago. Maybe a few hours at most. I'd washed his sweat-soaked face with water from my flask and bundled him up in our blankets. He was sleeping beside me and we were both tucked in between Raolcan and SKLW. I would have set up something for him on his own, but I was so tired and desperate when we'd landed that I just settled him as best as I could and then laid my head on Raolcan for only a moment. That turned into hours. We would have woken you, but we weren't sure if you could do anything about it. About what? I ran my hands through my hair and tried to collect myself. Where were we? We'd flown from the campsite with fireballs flying through the air behind us and soared off into the sky. I could remember hours of flying, stiff and afraid and clinging to Leng, worried he was dying as we flew, worried that we were being followed, worried that we were lost. We weren't lost. But we had been followed. We'd caught glimpses of someone behind us, and that's when Raolcan had veered further east. We didn't know who was following. It was easy to assume that whoever it was thought we'd follow the coastline. And then a storm had whipped up over the sea. We'd been driven by rain and gales of wind, and it had been all I could do to hold on. I had no idea where we were when the dragons cupped their wings and settled in a wooded dip on an island, far from where we're heading. Actually, those gales pushed us a long way. We're considerably closer to the Ruby Isles than we were before. Maybe we could catch up to Grandis Elfar and the other knots. We have more pressing concerns right now. Oh yes, Leng. I needed to check him and get some water into him. But more urgently, you'll need to deal with our visitors. Visitors? What was he talking about? I strained my ears and heard the crunch of boots on rock. We aren't the only ones who found the island in the storm. SKLW and I have taken turns listening for them while the others slept. They had. That was so unfair. They must be exhausted, and they hadn't even had the few hours of sleep that I'd had. You slept for 4 hours. We slept for 2. We're tired, but it is enough for now. Do you know who these people are? Sailors. Their ship is tucked into the cove below. It has square saffron-colored sails. I'd read about that. Square sails. Saffron. It had been in my lessons about nations. Baojang has ships like that. We dragons avoid them. The ships. The people of Baojang. Why? We have our reasons. I squirmed up, finding the tent pole I'd been using as a crutch the night before and pulling myself to my feet. I was right about the leather clothing of dragon riders. It wore well. Despite a firefight with magickas, a night in the rain, and then sleeping against a dragon, it looked just about the same as when I'd first put it on. I dusted myself off and pulled the leaves and twigs out of my hair. Okay, I didn't look like a barbarian. How about Leng? I pulled out a cloth, wet it, and wiped his face hurriedly. What else could I do? He was still breathing, but he was also mumbling lightly and hot as a furnace. The crack of a twig caught my attention and I stood, wobbling against my crutch and biting my lip. I'd never met anyone from another country before. How would I speak to them? They speak the common language. Had Raolcan traveled before we met? He seemed to know everything. I've been to every border of the Dominion and to the icy reaches of the Great North and the volcanoes of the Underland. I wasn't even sure where the Underland was. Good thing I had him. A man stepped out from the tall redwood trees with 2 others behind him, older and bulkier, their faces crisscrossed with scars. The first man was young, although older than me, Leng's age, perhaps, with chin-length black hair, olive skin, golden brown eyes, and an easy smile. He wore a complicated armor made of narrow horizontal plates that hinged together like he was an insect. A strange, curving metal band crowned his head, swirls and spirals reaching down from it along his cheeks, like an inverted crown. He smiled at me, but there was something hidden behind his eyes, like he was lying before he even spoke a word. Chapter 2. Dominion Sky People. His words were thickly accented, but the accent was attractive and exotic. I thought I could smell a strange spice on the breeze now that he was here. I licked my lips nervously. The 2 other men had taken up a stance on either side of him. Were there any more in the trees? Raolcan was unsaddled. So was Alskibby. If we had to run, how would I get Leng on his back? We won't need to run. They looked dangerous. We are dragons. We run from nothing. Except magickas. But maybe that was for Leng and my Sake. My diviners thought there were dragons on the top of the hill. The young man cocked his head to the side, his smile was all charm, like he wanted me to believe I was beautiful. It probably worked on most girls, but most girls didn't have a bad leg. I knew better than to think any man saw me as more than broken. We sheltered here in the storm. I felt like I had to say something, and it was the most innocuous thing I could think of. So far from the coast of the Dominion. You must have been blown off course. There was an edge to his words, as if he expected more from me. What did he think I was hiding? Yes, I said. He took a step toward Alskibby, hand raised, and I hobbled forward, stumbling slightly in my haste and catching myself with the crutch. Don't touch him. He'll take your hand off. His eyes were fixed on my crutch. Yeah, I figured he'd be done with charming me when he saw that. He put his hand down and stepped back. We don't see many dragons in Baojang. Do you need help with something? I just wanted him to go so I could check Leng. None that you can give, he said, his eyes fixed on my crutch. But perhaps I can offer you something. Your friend there looks ill. I glanced to where Leng was mumbling, his head turning from side to side. I'd like to offer you something that can heal him, but you'll need to leave him here and follow me. You can walk, can't you? Raolcan shifted uncomfortably. I don't like the idea of you leaving my sight with strangers. I think we have all we need, thank you. Leng would be fine. I just needed time to heal him. Besides, I didn't have the money to pay for any sort of medicines. He has a fever from an angry wound. Am I right? There was that look again, as if he wasn't telling me something. I've seen it before. He was wet last night in the storm, and look at him now, tossing and turning with visions and pain. I'd give him 1, maybe 2 more days. Until what? Until you have twice as many dragons as you did before. I clenched my jaw. I didn't want Leng to die. But was this strange man lying to me? Was he luring me away to do something terrible to me? I looked at Leng, who looked ghastly, and then back to the man from Baojang. I chewed my lip nervously. Before I leave here with you, I think I would like to know your name. He laughed, glancing at the 2 men on either side. They did not laugh. Their expressions made a knot form in my belly. I am Raolcan, the Prince of Baojang. I sail for the Dominion to meet my bride. Chapter 3. Was I supposed to bow or something? It was probably too late for that. I gave a wobbling dip, leaning on my crutch so I wouldn't fall. He laughed. Look, boys, a glorious dragon rider bows to me. I flushed. I'm only an initiate. He had a speculative look in his eye. Do you know the Atrellan family? I shook my head. After all, I didn't know Starry's family, did I? In that case, I'm not sure you're much use to me. Do you have a cure for my friend? I asked. I didn't like how he was looking at me like he could see the inside of my brain. Come on. He spun around and began to stride back the way he came. I shot Raolcan and Leng a worried look. We'll be fine here. Yell if you need me. Are you upset about having a dragon rider who isn't yours lying against you? I'm not as fussy as Alskibby is. Alskibby hissed, almost as if he could hear our mental conversation. Of course, he can. Great. I hurried to try to catch up to the prince, hobbling over the rocky terrain with difficulty. I missed my crutch. A stick just wasn't the same. After a few minutes, they were so far ahead that I'd lost track of them around a bend. I pushed harder, trying to catch up, and as I turned down a hill and around a large rock, Raolcan stepped out and surprised me. You take too long. You need a proper crutch, or do you dragon riders think you're above such things? Why did he expect me to be arrogant? Had I given him the wrong impression? I lost my crutch. What do you have that can cure Leng? That's your friend, Leng. Ahead of us, his men sat down on a fallen log in a wide clearing. One of them set to sharpening his knife, while the other whittled at a stick. The clearing, full of wild flowers, was wide and led to a sharp drop-off. Below, I could see the azure ripples of the sea and a magnificent ship bobbing in the water, her sails square and saffron in color. She was spectacular. What would it be like to travel in a vessel like that on the sea? Yes, I agreed. You are further south than I expected. I thought that Baojang was north and east of the Dominion. His eyes grew dark, like he was upset with what I'd said. Had I made a mistake in remembering the location of his nation? My diviners led me south. I have reason to be here, he said, shortly. Of course, I said. I didn't understand. What were diviners and why would they send him south in a ship? My studies suggested that the Dominion frowned on any ships other than merchant vessels sailing in our waters. But, then again, what did I know about what powerful people did? He plucked a white flower from the field, twirling it between his fingers. So, you claim to know nothing of Castellan Atrellan. I really don't. The daughter of that noble house is a dragon rider. A starry Atrellan, I believe. I nodded mutely as he plucked 2 more flowers. You aren't her. Starry. No, of course not. I'm Amel Leafbrought. He smiled, pleased by my words. And Castellan Leadress, you are not from that place. No. He thrust the flowers into my hand and bent to gather more. These flowers have fever-reducing qualities. You simply put the petals in boiling water and let them steep, then dose the patient every hour until the fever breaks. Thank you. I felt humbled that a prince was collecting flowers for my friend. So, he said, handing me another bunch of white flowers. Do dragon riders know magic? I laughed. If they do, then they haven't taught me yet. If they knew it, you'd know. He straightened and looked me over carefully. Once you meet a magicka you don't forget their power. I shivered. I thought you might have met them. He leaned in close, like he was going to share a secret. They have a special power. I find I resonate with it. I swallowed. I wanted nothing more of magic or magickas. He couldn't possibly know that they were hunting me. But they had mentioned Baojang. Did they know Prince Raktaran? Was he one of the ones they were conspiring with? I thought when I first met you that you might be my promised bride. She is a Dominion dragon rider like you. He cocked his head to the side and his smile became cruel. I should have known better. The insult stung, but at the same time, I certainly didn't want to marry Prince Raktaran, no matter how good-looking he was. I could sense a cruel streak in him, and the way he was looking at me like I was defective was no help at all. I hope you heal from your injury quickly. So, he didn't know I was crippled. He thought I was merely injured. After all, I was scuffed and rumpled and traveling with an injured man. Thank you. I couldn't admit to this man that I would never be whole again. And what Castellan family do you belong to? I want to be sure to remember when I meet them on the Ruby Isles. I'm not of a noble family, I said. He took a step backward, the flowers falling from his hands. He stared at me for 2 long minutes and then put his fingers to his mouth and whistled. His guards were by his side so quickly that I barely managed to catch my breath before they all rushed away, disappearing out of sight and leaving me standing alone in a field with my hands full of white flowers. Chapter 4. I gathered as many of the white flowers as I could and traced my steps back to the path up the hill. Hurry, or I might have to flame someone. What was wrong? Was it Leng? Was he worse? Not Leng, your prince. He wasn't my prince, certainly not. If he didn't look down on me for being crippled or common, he'd look down on me for not being Starry Atrellan who he was clearly. Wait. He'd mentioned Starry, but he'd also mentioned a bride. Hadn't Starry been angry that they'd chosen Savette instead of her? Was Prince Raktaran the Lord of Baojang that Savette was being sent to as a tribute bride? I hurried along the path. I was going to need a better crutch. This was ridiculous. I knew enough to be of some use and meanwhile, I could hardly get where I was needed because of my stupid leg. It flared with pain, as if objecting to the part where I thought it was stupid. I crested the hill to see the prince standing there in front of Raolcan and Alskibby, hands raised. Raolcan was standing, wings unfurled, and head drawn back like he meant to flame the prince while Alskibby stood protectively over Leng's prostrate form. Is this who Raolcan was threatening to flame? Yes. Prince Raktaran. My voice didn't carry the power I had hoped it would. It was like he didn't hear me. He just kept talking to the dragons. Easy, boys, easy, now. The diviner will be here in a moment and he'll break those bonds they put on you. We'll set you free from these dying riders and you can become the mounts of Baojang. Wouldn't you like to get a bit of your own back, eh? Help us show those who enslaved you what true freedom is. What was he talking about? He offers us revenge on the Dominion. Would they take it? They owed the Dominion nothing. But I love you, and Alskibby loves Leng. We do not serve you as other dragons serve their riders. We chose you for friendship, and with that comes love and loyalty. I felt a lump in my throat. I'd never stop being amazed at his kindness to me. And I'd never deserve it. It's not about deserving. It's never been about that. I needed to be brave for him and Alskibby and Leng. I cleared my throat. Prince Raktaran, leave the dragons in peace. He didn't even turn around. They don't belong to you. I'm not saying that they do. I'm asking you to stop harassing them. It felt like too bold a thing to say. Especially to royalty. But what other option was there? I could flame him. It would be best to avoid that. It could start a war. Magnificent beasts like this shouldn't be kept by mangled riders. They should be the mounts of a prince. Together, we shall spread the rule of Baojang, and I will show the council that I am their promised ruler. I shivered. I needed to distract him from this kind of thinking. Or I really will flame him. I thought you were getting married to a high castellan of the Dominion to cement peace between us. He barked a laugh and finally looked at me. You know more than you pretend. I held up a hand. I didn't want him to say too much, or there would be no peaceful way out. I know your intended, Savette leadress. His eyes lit up and he crossed his arms over his chest, intrigued and defensive at the same time. I'd like to know more about her. The dragons won't go with you, diviner or no diviner. He waved a hand like he didn't care anymore. He was surprisingly easy to divert from his intention if he was shown something more interesting. That was useful to know. So, you're of some use. Tell me about this Savette. She's very beautiful. He smiled. Good, I was on the right track. Very smart. He didn't seem as excited about that. Brave and strong. He shrugged. Of a powerful high castellan family, respected throughout the Dominion. His smile returned. He clearly saw her as a prize or a pawn. Oh, Savette, what had they done to her? I needed to get to wherever she was before he did. Either the Magickas would get there first and get rid of her to replace her with Starry, or this arrogant prince would take her for a wife. I wouldn't wish either outcome on my friend. And she rides a dragon like these. He looked like he was thinking hard. Perhaps, as a dowry, they will give me a dozen of these with riders. No, 20. He looked me over, with able-bodied, strong riders. I tried to keep my face smooth of the irritation I felt. Even my enemies disregarded me. He rubbed his chin with a finger and thumb and then finally smiled. You may tend to your friend and leave. I think I have better plans to dwell on. He turned to leave, but then turned back to me. Oh, and don't tell anyone about this meeting or I'll have my men slay this lovely dragon of yours. I hear purple ones are rare. You might have a hard time replacing him. He walked into the forest as carefree as if he didn't have two angry dragons right behind his back. My mouth was still hanging open long after he was gone. It wasn't like that. Raolcan could never be replaced at all. In retrospect, I probably should have flamed him. Chapter 5. I scrambled across the ground to where Leng lay. I'll watch for them. If they come back, they'll see why they can't just take a dragon. We have no pact with them. He left, creeping down the path. Alskibby hissed at me as I drew near, but he backed up so that I could reach Leng and I ignored his bad temper. He was probably just worried like I was. He is. Dragons don't get sick the way Leng is. He was slumped over the rock in an uncomfortable way. I sat down next to him and flipped him onto his back, tucking blankets from our bedrolls under his head. Our things were scattered across the ground, whether from Leng's thrashing or the dragon's reaction to Raktaran, I didn't know. Leng mumbled something, his eyes fluttering open. I grabbed the flask of water, wet a rag and wiped his forehead and face hurriedly. He was burning up. I offered him a drink, and when he opened his mouth I gently poured a tiny stream of water for him, trying not to give him too much too quickly. Amel. Don't give up on me, Leng. I'm making some medicine for you. He closed his eyes and I waited a moment to see if he would ask anything else. When he was silent I hobbled to the packs, pulled out a pot, and filled it with the last of the drinking water. I tore the velvety white petals from their stems, surprised by their sweet smell. Just the scent of them made me feel less tired. I threw them in the pot, mercilessly, and set to work building a fire. As soon as I had the tincture made I'd need to find fresh water. Let me. I looked up to see Raolcan had returned from wherever he had gone. I kindled a tiny flame, blowing on it to light the kindling pile I'd made. The men have returned to their ship. I will keep an eye on them until they're gone. There is a fresh stream to the south. Give me your waterskins and I will fill them. How would he do that? He didn't have hands and the task would be nearly impossible using your mouth. Let me worry about that. I hesitated, playing with sticks as I set them over the flame, but after a moment I stood, gathered the waterskins and handed them to him. The draft the healers had made for Leng was used up. I gave Raolcan the draft flasks as well. We'd need a lot of water to get Leng well. Raolcan gripped them all between his teeth and I could almost have sworn he was smiling. I spent the rest of the morning brewing the tincture and trying to keep Leng warm enough or cool enough as he moved from sweating to shaking and back again. Alskibby paced around us, never once settling down. He made me feel jumpy, but I didn't blame him. I just wished that he could join Raolcan in flying over us and watching for enemies. I have that covered. You should also know that the Baojang ship has set sail. She moves northwest. Strange, don't you think, that a powerful human would be so far from his territorial waters and with only one ship? It was strange, but I had no time to dwell on it. The forest floor, dappled with green shadows and golden sunbeams, though beautiful, was a terrible place for a sick man. I dragged fallen trees and branches to make a lean-to, dragging Leng into it when I was finished and wrapping him up with the blanket. Since the tincture was finished I'd been feeding it to him every hour by my best guess. His shaking and sweating seemed to be less, but I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or if he was getting too ill for even that. In early evening, Raolcan dropped down to the clearing to present a pair of birds to me and another handful of them to Alskibby. He ate them immediately, flaming them first. I set to the work of dressing the birds and cooking them with water in the pot. A broth would be good for Leng if I could get it into him. I was worried that his breath seemed fainter than it had earlier. Was he better or worse? Amel, he said for the 1000th time as the night grew colder. I was keeping the fire hot, afraid to sleep in case I missed giving him the tincture. Amel, I see them flying. Do you, Leng? I asked gently, tucking the blankets back around him. He'd knocked them off again as he slept. Flying so far above, flying. I checked his breath with the back of my hand, worried when his words faded off. He was still breathing. Alskibby shuffled in beside the lean-to, creeping on all fours. He was also refusing to sleep, though Raolcan had eventually stopped his circling and settled down nearby. He was the only one getting any rest tonight. The hours were long and slow and I fought exhaustion as I moved woodenly from one task to the next. Feed the fire. Give Leng his tincture. Bathe his forehead with water. Feed the fire. Dawn came eventually, hours after I thought it should have. Fog wreathed our clearing and obscured anything more than a dragon length away. In the white stillness, Leng's eyes flickered open and he smiled. Amel, where are the others? The others. Grandis Lemon, Ray, Starry, the others in your knot. I watched him hopefully. He seemed like he was with us again, not floating on fever dreams. Ray and Grandis Lemon are dead and Starry joined the Magickas in killing them. We escaped at the last minute. Can you remember that? I thought it was a dream. He sat up, weakly. You should rest, I said, anxiously offering him a waterskin and a flask of the broth I'd made the night before. I can rest just fine sitting up. You look tired, maybe you should sleep. He seems better, maybe you should listen. I glanced towards Raolcan and saw two sets of glowing eyes staring at us through the fog, him and Alskibby keeping watch. Leng finished his tincture and broth and then lay down again and promptly fell asleep. There was some color in his cheeks again and no sweat on his brow. Relieved, I lay on the ground beside him. I just rest my eyes for a moment. Only for a moment. Chapter 6. I awoke to whistling and sat up to see Leng oiling our tack. He'd changed his clothing and washed his face. He looked like a new man entirely. You slept most of the day away, he said with a smile. His easy nature was back. He was well again. I smiled, gently, wondering what he would think of everything that had happened when I explained it all. Alskibby has been filling me in on everything I missed. Apparently, he's taken a strong dislike to a prince of Baojang. With good reason, I said. He wanted to take him. He finished polishing the saddle he was working on and handed me a crutch, his fingers brushing gently against mine as he passed it to me. He blushed and pulled his hand away quickly. I took it in awe, surprised to see one here. After a moment's inspection, I realized he'd carved the top and fitted it with leather. It was a different shape than I was used to, fitting along my forearm instead of under my arm. For me? I asked. I knew it was, and yet it was a lavish gift. He must have been carving it while I slept. It's the only way I can thank you for taking care of me. I know that it wasn't easy for you and that it put you in a lot of danger. I'm so grateful for your care. I felt myself blushing as I inspected the portion that fitted around my arm. He'd carved his initials into it. LS. We need to leave soon, so we need you to be mobile again, he said, looking like he felt awkward. He kicked idly at a clump of dirt at his feet before looking up at me wistfully. Why did he look so sad and longing all at once? I need to get you back to the teachers of Dragon School and back to your studies. That felt so far away. I had Savette to warn and a Magicka plot to foil. So much has happened since I left Dragon School. I feel like there are more important things going on right now than studies. When we meet back up with the teachers you can tell them all about those things. His mouth was firm. I appreciate everything you've done, Amel, but you're a student. It's not right to put you in danger or to have you out here in the wild with me. You need to be back in the care of your teachers and learning what you'll need to be a full dragon rider. From what SKLW tells me, we aren't too far away. We'll leave first thing tomorrow and make full haste to the Ruby Isles. Why did I feel so disappointed? Somehow, I'd thought that maybe after going through all of this I could carry on with the adventure and keep on making decisions for myself. Maybe I'd also expected a bit more respect from him. After all, I'd been keeping him alive these past few days. He felt, what was the word? Distant. Like he was keeping himself apart from me. I guess maybe it was silly to think it would be any other way. It had only been his illness that had thrown us together. He was a full dragon rider and I was a student. We couldn't be close friends like that, could we? It was probably inappropriate. We certainly couldn't be anything more than close friends. I'd better test out this crutch, I said, hobbling away down the path. I was glad that I didn't cry until he was out of sight. After all, my tears were silly. What had I expected? It was hours before I trusted myself to return to the camp. I didn't sleep in the lean-to, but instead, I curled up against Raolcan to sleep. Don't worry, Spider. I remember what you did for him. I admire your courage. I won't forget and I won't treat you like you are less than me. I fell asleep clinging to the faith in his thoughts. Chapter 7. We'd left at first light. Even with my disappointment that the intimacy between Leng and I had evaporated, I still found flying exhilarating. Leng didn't keep us flying in a steady, even line like Grandis Lemon had. SKLW swooped and darted, occasionally even barrel rolling over the ocean as we made for the coast again. Raolcan followed him and I sensed his giddiness at being able to fly free again. He wore reins, but I didn't bother with them, simply tying them to the saddle horn and setting my hands gently on his neck to help me keep my balance. He didn't need me to tell him where or how to fly. Leng looked so much better, his back straight and his face clear of pain for the first time in days. He moved a little gingerly when we were on foot, but his smile was easy, and he seemed over his illness. He kept himself a bit remote, though, standing up immediately any time I sat nearby and rushing off to tend to some urgent task. When I spoke to him, he answered politely, but he gave no more information than what was strictly necessary. My heart plummeted deeper into disappointment every time. I'd hoped we'd be close friends after everything, but he probably didn't even remember it all. Stop pouting over the man and look at how the sun sparkles on the sea. How many humans do you think have ever looked at the world from so high? He had a great point. I'd never even expected it myself. I needed to enjoy this, not complain about what I didn't have. As the hours passed, I found I was enjoying myself more, relaxing into Raolcan and his movements and just letting gratitude fill me instead of hurt feelings. I was so busy enjoying myself that the first I realized that we had a problem was when Raolcan tensed. What's wrong? I asked. Weather is brewing on the shore. We should be hunkering down somewhere to wait it out. Over the sea, it could get really dangerous. Leng and SKLW didn't seem to be changing course. They flew on, faster than ever. Hold on. I hunkered low over Raolcan's neck as he shot forward, wings propelling us forcefully ahead. He pulled us level with Leng and Leng gave a hand signal, 2 fingers spread apart, tapping on his forearm. What did that mean? No one had taught it to me yet. Leng tried the signal again, as if I simply wasn't seeing it. He looked frustrated as he gave up signaling and swept his arm from in front of him to behind as if trying to wave us back in behind him. Alskibi is also demanding that I fall back behind him. Was he saying why? I didn't understand why we weren't landing in the forest to ride out the storm. Leng wants us to harness the storm to make up a few days of traveling. If we are careful, we can catch the winds and ride them. In theory, that made sense, but I could already feel the wind picking up and it was pushing me hard from the left, not from behind. Exactly. We can't just ride it. We'd have to tack back and forth across it. It will still get us there faster, but it will be a rough ride for you and Leng and it will be dangerous. He's betting hard that Alskibi and I can fly winds like that. He must be desperate to get us to the Ruby Isles. Was he just desperate to be away from me? Don't be so self-centered. This isn't about you. Something else is going on in that man's mind. Alskibi turned his head to the side long enough to hiss and Raolcan fell in behind him. It looked like he was willing to go along with the plan. It's that or else let them fly on without us. Which do you prefer? We'd better stick with them. I didn't want to be alone out here. You wouldn't be alone, but I see your point. Hours later, I was regretting my agreement to this. The clouds around us were black and thick. The wind so strong that the dragons had to dive and swoop, roll, and then fight to gain height again. I'd vomited up every scrap of food inside me and I was still so queasy that it was all I could do to hold on with the land and sea spinning beneath me and dark clouds swirling from every direction. Even Raolcan seemed worried. He was so focused that he hardly spoke to my mind at all as he fought the gales. I couldn't go on. My hands were too tired. I was going to fall off. Steady now. My leg throbbed with pain. I hadn't been able to move out of this position in hours and the weight of my dead leg just hanging there made my hip ache so strongly that it was almost all I could think of. Stay steady. Focus on the horizon. And where was that, exactly? I'd lost any sense of direction hours ago. I didn't even know where Leng and Alskibi were. Ahead of us, I assumed, but I couldn't tell. Lashes of rain obscured my vision and ran down through my eyes. I didn't have a single bit of dry cloth to wipe them with. My hair hung wet and bedraggled in a thick knot. I gritted my teeth and hung on, fighting my roiling belly and swimming head. It felt like days later when the flying grew more steady and after about an hour of flying in a straight line my head wasn't swimming anymore. I still felt lightheaded and like I needed to move carefully, but I wasn't just holding on, worried I might die. The rain had reduced to a light mist and if it wasn't so dark I'd have thought we were through the clouds. We are through the clouds. It's just night now. He was right. This was the velvety black of night. Were Leng and Alskibi safe? They're ahead of us. Alskibi says the rain will clear. On cue, I felt dry air wafting over me and my vision cleared enough to see a faint crescent moon glinting over the sea. Ahead of us was a golden glow and between us and the glow I could faintly pick out Alskibi and Leng. I drank from my waterskin, trying to settle my stomach, and stared at the horizon. A dark mass freckled with golden lights grew closer by the moment. It was very vertical, as if, like Dragon's Skull, it was a structure built into a cliff. When we closed with it, Raolcan banked sharply and I found myself enraptured by the tiny world beneath us, lit in one bubble of gold after another. In those bubbles, tiny people spoke and ate and danced. We crested the peak of the bluffs banking the ocean, swept up over the landscape that formed a kind of horseshoe-shaped dish and then dove down into the center of it where the light was brightest. The buildings and carved rock grew closer and Alskibi seemed to hesitate a moment before banking sharply, extending his feet and then grasping the ground in a muscular landing. Raolcan hit the ground beside her with equal intensity and I was still catching my breath and looking around in bewilderment at the carved rock poles rising high into the air all around us, when Leng spoke. Welcome to the Ruby Isles, Amel Leafbrought. I gaped at the poles, carved with the faces of beasts and man, some so strange I could not identify them. I let my eyes pass over them and the endless pools lit with floating candles. Bridges crossed and recrossed them and a party of people were headed our way. My eyes eventually found Leng's. His were shining with joy while a small smile played on his lips, like he'd just given me a gift. His fond expression was more intimate than I had expected after his cold behavior earlier. He opened his mouth to speak, but he was cut off by the arrival of our welcoming party. What had he been about to say? Leng Shardson, Amel Leafbrought, what are you doing here alone? Grandis Elfar looked exactly as I'd last seen her, except for her worried expression. Chapter 8. I will give you a full brief, Grandis, after I deliver my missive, Leng said, pulling a long cylinder out of his shirt. He'd had a message all this time. How could I not have known that? Of course, Dragon Rider, Grandis Elfar said. Until then, I beg that you keep the circumstances of our arrival secret. There were 4 men with her in official-looking black and gold uniforms. I doubted this would be a secret. Grandis Elfar frowned. It's hardly appropriate for you to be traveling alone with one of our students, Leng. Do I need to put you on report? We have very important news, I said. We needed to tell Savette what was happening immediately. Leng frowned and laid a hand on my shoulder repressively. Which we won't be sharing out here in the open. But. This time Grandis Elfar gave me a disapproving look as Leng reached past me and unhooked my crutch from Raolcan's saddle. Your student must be warned from speaking to anyone of what she saw, Grandis. I will alert those who need to know about it myself. I'm pleased to give her back into your capable hands. When you hear my report, you will understand how this situation came about. Of course, Grandis Elfar agreed. We will speak when your message has been delivered. And after I tend to these dragons. He grabbed my bedroll and bag from Raolcan's saddle and handed them to me with my crutch. I can take care of Raolcan, I said as I adjusted my crutch and the bags. Not tonight, he said firmly. I felt like a child being sent to bed for the night. Come, child, Grandis Elfar said, only adding to the feeling. I stalled, fiddling with my bags before giving Leng one last look. Only we knew that Grandis Lemon and Ray were dead or knew how they died. Only we knew about Prince Raktaran and where we'd seen him. Someone needed to know. Leng, I really think that I need to tell Grandis Elfar. This time his finger pressed against my words to cut off what I was about to say. His words were harsh but his eyes gentle and full of an emotion I couldn't identify. I've already told you I would deal with it. Initiate. This is Dragon Rider business and none of yours. Now, go with your instructor and do not fear for your dragon. I will tend to his needs. My mouth dropped open at the distant way he treated me, and then Grandis Elfar was at my elbow gesturing to me to follow the uniformed guards who were already marching down the path. Dragon Rider Shardson will take care of everything, child. I'm glad to see you safe and well. Come to your lodgings and we will add you to a new knot tomorrow. I followed her through the dark, so stunned that I couldn't give my new surroundings a proper inspection. She took me to a grand building, led me through a narrow door and up a flight of stairs to a wide room with open windows and beds mounded with sleeping forms. Silently, she showed me an empty bed and left me in the moonlight. With nothing else to do, I stripped out of my wet leathers and went to bed. Chapter 9. Do you think she's competition? The voice sounded uncertain and I hoped it wasn't talking about me. I just needed a few moments more of sleep. She's a cripple. So, it was definitely me. Hopefully, they would stick to speculation and just let me sleep. Well, she won't be competition if she sleeps right through the first day, and it looks like she's going to. First day, my eyes popped open to see a ring of girls in grey and brown leathers looking at me speculatively. This must be Grandis Elfar's knot. There weren't any from my original wave of initiates and I didn't know any of the names. 2 of them were blonde and identical in appearance, right down to their crowns of braided hair, very practical for riding dragons. 1 more had curling red hair that looked far too much like Starry's for my preference. A 4th wore her black hair in a thick braid down her back. They were all fit and muscled as most dragon riders and initiates were. The redhead smiled at me. Awake, sleepyhead, aren't you from the newest wave? The ones they rushed through. I nodded sleepily. I'm Amel Leafbrought. I'm Artis Sandblown, another commoner. That was nice in a world that seemed to be full of high castellans and princes these days. She smiled kindly at me. In her brown leathers, she was sworn and the green scarf she wore suggested she probably rode a green dragon. Stop wasting time with her, Artis. If we don't find some breakfast soon, I doubt we'll get a chance to eat all morning. That was the one with the black braid. She was also wearing brown and I recognized her haughty voice as the girl who had thought I'd be no competition because I was a cripple. I gave her a steady level look and she raised her chin. She was not impressed by me. I won't waste anyone's time if you'll just give me a chance to get dressed. I reached for my bag and dug out a fresh set of leathers, grateful to have something that wasn't soaked in rain. Don't take too long, Artis said. Lenora is right. We need to find breakfast and then tack up our dragons. Grandis Elfar wants us in the sky first thing, practicing. When the Dark Prince arrives, we will escort his ship in and we need to be ready to fly in formation and hold up the reputation of the Dominion. It sounded like quite the role to fill. The blonde girls backed up, serious expressions on their identical faces, and I got dressed. I was buckling my belt when Grandis Elfar strode into the room. Come on, initiates, we have dragons to gear up and practice to get to. You'll have more than enough time to sit and gossip later. When the Prince of Baojang comes there will be dinners and dancing and long soaks in the hot springs. Is that what you want, sky people of the Dominion? The other girls answered in unison with a guttural, ho. I agreed with the sentiment, but dinner sounded good. My stomach growled loudly and I gripped my crutch as my face grew hot. I hope the rest of you are more focused than Amel is. Now, march, let's get to the alcoves and get our dragons oiled and tacked. The other initiates streamed out the door and I hobbled after them. I was almost through the arch when Grandis Elfar drew me aside by the elbow. I spoke with Dragon Rider Shardson about what transpired when your knot was on its own. We are devastated by the loss of Grandis Lemon and Ray Tenpenny. Her leathery face took on a grim look. We don't really know all the circumstances yet, so until we have finished investigating, we request that you remain quiet and speak of this to no one. You are part of my knot now and I will see to your care and education. We didn't know. What did she mean? I knew. I'd seen it all. Grandis Elfar, I saw. She frowned and made a suppressing motion with her hands. Obey me, Amel. Obey or leave the Dragon Riders forever. Our orders are not optional. I nodded my head and she smiled. Good. Now, it sounds like you had no time at all for learning. I'm going to assign artists to teach you what you need to know of decorum and manners and you can learn flight formation and maneuvering flying with the other girls. That should be enough new training for now. After the Prince of Baojang's diplomatic mission, we'll test what you've learned and reassess. Be dedicated in your studies. Just because we are currently away from Dragon School doesn't mean that we'll tolerate slackers or hangers-on. Come now, let's find the others. I followed her out into the sunlight, gaping as I finally saw where we were. We stepped out onto a cobblestone road, every cobble carefully cut with 6 sides. In clusters or alone, the massive poles I saw last night stood high, towering over buildings or clustered along roads. Every one was carved with a dozen faces of animals and man. They felt important and ominous all at once. In the distance I saw one so large that a dragon was perched on it, looking out over the city, his rider balanced precisely on his back. Spires rose all along the shore of the rocky island and roads curved along the edge of them. The harbor was filled with ships of every size and shape. Most of their sails were furled, but here and there I saw a white sail being tied up or raised as a ship left. I didn't see the saffron sails of Baojang anywhere. Had Leng told Grandis Elfar about that part of our journey? I followed her as we climbed up behind the rows of grand houses, warehouses and small palaces towards the cliffs behind them. Bridges crossed and recrossed the canals and rivers that crisscrossed the port city. What is this city called? I've only heard the place called the Ruby Isles. I asked. They call it Ruby Isle City. They're not known for their creativity beyond these Ashavan poles. Grandis Elfar replied, but her focus was on something ahead and I followed her gaze to where servants were hanging garlands along the street. Bunting and colorful banners were also being set up along the steep roof peaks of inns and taverns and across the front of markets as we passed. The buildings here were low and squat with roofs far taller than the walls of the buildings, soaring in steep peaks and thatched heavily. The walls were all white mud smeared to silky smoothness. I'd never seen buildings like this before, but I'd never been so far north, either. The cliff faces were not far, and soon I was pulling myself up a ladder behind Grandis Elfar and feeling very grateful for all the practice I'd had at Dragon School. Above us were the dragon alcoves and a chance to see Raolcan again. It felt like days since I'd seen him last, since this place was so different than the wilderness we'd left behind. I needed his wisdom. Should I really hold my tongue like Grandis Elfar had asked, or should I be searching for Savette? Shouldn't she know what kind of man she was being asked to marry and who might be threatening her life? Chapter 10. Here we are. Hurry, now. Grandis Elfar pointed to the end of the line of alcoves as we arrived on the third level and I hurried down the line. Green dragons were in every alcove, snapping and hissing as I passed. Grandis Elfar's dragon was in the first alcove I passed, his name chalked on the wall, Telsut. The rest of our knot were along the rest of the row and I read the names on the chalkboards as I passed. Artist Sandblown and her dragon, Seniaso. Castellan Lenora Deneris and her dragon, Lipukram. The twins were Ola Tenkoran and her dragon, Neojue, and Ora Tenkoran and her dragon, Iame. Raolcan, as usual, was on the end and the only purple dragon in the long line. I scrambled into the alcove with his name chalked on the board and stopped dead at the sight of Leng standing beside him. I thought he told me not to spend time near dragons that weren't mine and now here he was breaking that rule. I felt glad to see him there. Perhaps, he was sorry for treating me so distantly. Did Grandis Elfar talk to you about keeping your mouth shut? He asked. I felt my cheeks grow hot. So, he was here to make sure I could keep quiet. Didn't any of them trust me? I'm glad that you look well. How do you feel? We could try for some courtesy, at least. Don't worry about me, he said. He seemed agitated. Just be sure not to tell anyone what you saw, Amel. He moved in close so that we were only inches apart and whispered his next words. I kept my eyes firmly fixed on the ground. I didn't want him to see my hot cheeks and embarrassment. If anyone knows what you saw, you could be in danger. I don't want you hurt over a fight that isn't yours. Leng, both Starry, and the Magickas know what I saw. And by the time they get here, I hope to have the High Castellan here ready to arrest them. Seriously, Amel, your safety is important to me. I looked up, finally, catching an expression on his face that I hadn't expected, tender protectiveness. He really did care about my safety. He was a dedicated defender of others. Or perhaps, he actually is your friend and your hurt feelings were for no reason. If only I was a dragon with the ability to read another person's thoughts. You can wish all you want, but it's the one thing humans will never have. Except, I could read Raolcan's thoughts. Leng cleared his throat, before pulling me into a sudden hug. Just take care, be safe. He rubbed his scalp awkwardly, smiled and then left so quickly that my arms were still open from the hug. What in the world should I make of that? He blew hot and cold from moment to moment, friendly and kind one moment and then barking orders. Never mind him. I need some oil on my spine and by the smell of it, they have oil infused with basil. I love it when they infuse the oil. I moved to get the oil and tend to Raolcan and his needs. Leng's sweet concern meant something to me, but I'd have to think about it later. 20 minutes later I had my tack cleaned, oiled, and inspected and Raolcan oiled and watered. He seemed pleased at the prospect of flying formations. I don't like having to sit around in an alcove and I've been spoiled the last few days. I like flying. When you're a full dragon rider be sure to be an ambitious one so we can fly all the time. I made a mental note to do that. I liked flying, too. Ready. Artis poked her head into the alcove. The rest of us are about to launch. Do you know how to take off from an alcove? Sure, I didn't, but Raolcan did, and I wouldn't bother to tell him how to do his job. Good girl. Okay, then here's how we'll fly. I'm lead, Ola and Ora are seconds in the VU and Lenora will anchor. Have you flown formations? Once, I said nervously. Even with Raolcan doing the flying, I should know about this. She sighed. Okay, it's simple. As anchor, your job is to stay tight on the second's tail but not to crowd her. Watch for danger from behind and anticipate your move by watching us closely. It's easy to foul things up as an anchor if you aren't prompt in the maneuver, but at least you don't need to know every move, you just need to know how to follow. Got it? I nodded. Make me proud. We're practicing to be an escort for the Baojang diplomatic ship, you know. Okay, I'm off to mount up. Wait for Ora to launch and then you kick off and follow her tail, alright? I nodded again. I need to hear it. You say, yes, squadron leader. Yes, squadron leader, I said as enthusiastically as I could. She smiled, pulled her red curls back and tucked them into a headscarf and hurried away at an almost run. I mounted Raolcan, tucked my crutch in the saddle and waited for my turn. This should be fun. Chapter 11. Artus was first to leap from the ledge on Senioso. He leapt like he was going to dive into the ground below, then he somersaulted and kicked against the rock face, rocketing horizontally towards the horizon. I gasped, wondering how long it had taken Artus to master such a bold move. Aura and Ola were both still in grey leathers, which meant they were initiates like me, though they'd been in training a lot longer. Surely, they wouldn't try anything as showy or dangerous. I cinched my straps nervously, checking that all the safety leathers were tight. With sudden speed, the twins dragons shot out of their alcoves, diving headfirst towards the ground and the somersaulting and pushing off from the rock face in the same way Senioso had, the great muscles bunching with the force. They were like divers leaping into water and then swimming, all forward thrust and force. I was mesmerized by their flight skyward, their speed was beyond belief. Raolcan surprised me when he stepped forward, his toes right on the edge of the ledge. I glanced to the side and saw that Lenora and her dragon Lipukram were lined up with us. She nodded haughtily to me. Oh no, it was our turn. I didn't think I could do it. I was going to throw up or faint or... Raolcan launched while I was still panicking, diving like the others had toward the rocks below. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming and then we were somersaulting through the air with nothing but the straps holding me in place, my head whirling as we flipped and then shot forward on the force of his kickoff. We were like a shooting star, darting toward the horizon, the island below us becoming nothing but a blur beneath our feet. I gasped, clinging to the saddle horn and just grateful that I didn't need to direct Raolcan like most dragon riders did. He was capable of flying this course without direction. Wooey, now, this is the life. Get 'em to take you out like this every day. Our launch had thrown us right into line behind Aura and now Raolcan spun in a quick barrel roll like she did, exactly in time. As soon as my head cleared I saw that we were right where we should be in formation, not crowding Aura, but only a heartbeat behind her, just as she was only a heartbeat behind Artus. Beside me, Lenora gave a dragon rider signal, a single thumb held up. I needed someone to teach me these signs as soon as possible, although judging from her huge grin she was pleased with my performance. We swooped in R-V formation around the island, throwing in the occasional trick move and then Artus gave a hand signal and suddenly instead of A-V, Ola and then Aura and then Lenora formed a long line. Raolcan moved to his place at the tail of the line without any need for me to prompt him. It's easy enough to see what she wants, and we dragons can talk without hand signals. That would be nice. It would make it less confusing trying to guess what people were feeling and thinking. We trailed in the long line and then Artus dove and the line followed her until we were formed in a vertical ring, snout to snout again. It was exhilarating and dizzying to spin like that, but another hand signal and the ring shifted to turn horizontal. A third signal and we were back in the V, racing toward the island. We spent the entire morning drilling formations until my thighs were weak as jelly and my head was light and swimming from the constant shifts of direction and altitude. When it, at last, became clear that we were headed back to the alcoves, I breathed a sigh of relief. I needed solid ground under my feet for long enough to recover. Not that I didn't love flying, but it was hard work. Not for me. I hope they drill us every day. Don't worry, Raolcan. Grandis Elfar said it was one of only 2 things she wanted me taught, although I'd also like to add those hand signals. Good, hold 'em to that. I like stretching my wings. Our landing was violent, like a hawk catching a rabbit. We flew full speed toward the alcove and at the last second Raolcan grabbed it with his feet, arresting our movement and flinging us into the alcove. My heart was like a hurricane and it was several short breaths before I managed to slow it down enough to steady my shaking hands. Was I cut out for this life? You're doing great. Even little dragons aren't put through their paces this quickly. Just keep trusting me and you'll pass with flying colors. I leaned down and pressed my cheek to his warm back, comforted by his supportive thoughts. My leg twinged badly, and my back was sore from traveling so much with the leg dangling to one side. I needed to make a proper sling or something to hold the dead weight. Reluctantly, I slid off his back with a last caress and set to work removing his saddle and tack and rubbing him down with the basil oil he loved so much. Did he need food? They'll feed me again soon. They fed us this morning. It's different here than at the school. There are stable masters who tend to those things. At least he was being taken care of. He'd tell me if he needed something more, wouldn't he? Of course, I would. I smiled to myself and finished the work. I was getting hungry enough to eat whatever they were going to feed Raolcan. Day-old sheep, or maybe not. Amel, are you there? The silvery voice made me freeze in the act of adjusting my crutch. It couldn't be, could it? Chapter 12. Savette, is that you? The sun was right behind her and I couldn't make out her face. She was wearing a filmy dress. I hadn't seen Savette in a dress since our first day at Dragon School. She stepped into the alcove so that I could see her and then threw her arms around me. I gasped, so stunned that it took me a moment to remember to hug her back. I thought you were angry with me. I was. She sounded like she'd been crying. I don't think you've hugged me before. I don't hug people, as a rule. She pulled back and I studied her expression. What had happened over the last few days? Her expression was hard but underneath it was a trembling softness like she was fighting off fear. She grabbed my upper arm and began tugging me. Come on. I'm supposed to go and eat. I couldn't just leave my knot and follow her, could I? What would artists say? There's food where I'm bringing you. I licked my lips nervously. I wanted to make peace with Savette. It troubled me that we had left each other on bad terms. But, what kind of trouble would I get into if I abandoned my studies to chase after her? Amel, I'm about to be married to a man I've never met. I think you can spare me your lunch hour to talk. It seemed reasonable enough. I gripped my crutch more firmly and followed her. She led me out of the stables and down the long ladders to the bridge-woven city. Savette seemed familiar with it already, ducking under a bridge here and pulling me through an alley there. I was grateful that Leng's crutch made movement easier, but even with that new burst of energy, I found following her difficult. She stopped every few minutes and waited for me, but she was impatient. I felt like it was all she could do not to roll her eyes. Isle City was packed with people, even in the back alleys and under the bridges. Some people slept, huddled in crannies and nooks along our path. Others pushed wheelbarrows of fish, clearly delivering them to customers, while still others pushed wheelbarrows of waste to who knew where. Smells of spicy food and bread wafted from the back doors of what must have been restaurants, and even in the alleys, sellers hawked their wares, mostly things of a practical nature such as cutcloth and baskets. I thought I was probably seeing a side to the city that I wouldn't have seen with Grandis Elfar. Have you been here before, Savette? I asked. You seem very familiar with the place. One city is much like another, she said with a shrug. It was hard to reconcile this hard, indifferent Savette with the passionate, high-minded Savette from Dragon School. Eventually, she led me through a white iron-wrought gate in a white iron-wrought fence. It looked like it was woven of rose vines and roses, interwoven and connected to such a degree that I couldn't tell which were the real roses from behind the gate and which were the false ones of the gate. Stop staring at the gate, come on. Savette threw the gate open and pulled me into an enclosed courtyard with plants growing in glorious sprays and carefully tended blossoming. Where is this place? I breathed. It's my private garden behind the High Castellan's North Court, or at least it is for now. There are hot springs. Have you ever soaked in a hot spring? I shook my head. I never had. I have an extra bathing dress. Follow me. It will feel amazing after sitting on the back of a dragon all morning. I followed her, still stunned by this new, slightly raw Savette. She was so different from the frosty, controlled Savette of Dragon School. I noticed as I hobbled after her that the ground was smooth, but rippled, like it was raw stone, not flagstones laid down. I couldn't help but follow the patterns of it with my eyes as we moved into her rooms. It was still the flooring there, too, even when she deposited me behind a silk screen and handed me a black linen bathing dress. Dress quickly, we have so much to talk about. I shed my leathers, put on the small bathing dress and stepped out to see Savette in a matching one. It's through here, she said, and we went back out to the garden to where a rock face seemed to merge with the side of the White Palace. The rock face bent inward, the rippled rock looking natural and very shallow water flooding over the rocks here and there. To one side, it flowed in a narrow channel out into the garden, and as my eyes adjusted to what was definitely a natural cave in the rock, I saw a wide pool with blue lanterns lit and hung all around it. Food was laid out on a tray beside the spring. Savette was already stepping into the warm water, and I carefully set my crutch to the side and sat down so I could work my way toward the water as well. It smelled of salt and some other sort of mineral that I didn't know the name of, but it felt invigorating as I slipped in and let the hot water ebb the pain in my muscles away. And now we talk, Savette said, looking at me intently. I was pretty sure that she wouldn't let me go until I told her everything, and I swallowed as I realized suddenly that to do that I would have to go against everything Grandis Elfar and Leng had told me to do. Chapter 13. She cleared her throat and looked around her nervously. I have no allies here, Amel. But you saved my life, so I think you may be one. I've been thinking about you and your courageous heart. We can't talk about this anywhere else, do you understand? I shook my head. What was she talking about? You'd think sound would carry here, but the way the cave is shaped and the porous stone of the walls and floor make it a dead zone. It's impossible to eavesdrop on anyone in the pool. So, that's why you brought me here. She nodded her head. I have to talk to someone. I got a letter from my father saying he had agreed to allow the Dominar to give me to Baojang as a peace offering. War is brewing, and it is their hope that a marriage between the Prince of Baojang and a high Castellan family will prevent hostility. Why you? Why not Starry? If the Magickas were to be believed, it was meant to be her. Savette nodded. I thought you knew nothing about Castellan politics, but you are correct that Castellan Atrellan would have been the more natural choice than Castellan Leadress, but the Dominar knows our loyalty. She bit her lip. I don't want to cause a war. I know what war means. Innocent people will die. Little children, families, and not just from the conflict. I was taught history well by my tutors. War causes shortages and accidental cruelty. People won't be able to feed their families. There will be orphans and widows. There will be farms that fail and people who lose everything. I can't let that happen if I can prevent it. Her eyes teared up. But I don't want to marry a man I know nothing about. I cleared my throat. Now was the time to say something. I felt my face heating and my heart beating quickly. I hated drama and conflict, but I needed to be brave, didn't I? Savette was being brave. I know something about him. Her mouth formed an O of surprise. I met him on my way here. He was on a ship, or rather he found me on an island when his ship sheltered there in the storm. And what was he like? She asked it like the answer meant life or death for her. I supposed that in a way it did. I gauged my answer carefully. He was young and fit. Attractive. And, did you speak? Did he say anything to you? He wanted to know about the woman he was going to marry and he seemed unhappy when he heard it was you, like maybe he doesn't like your family. She was nodding like that made sense. He wanted it to be Starry. So, he knows about her. And he wants them to give him 20 dragon riders and dragons as a dowry. Savette snorted, adjusting herself in the hot water. Already sweat was beading on her brow and I felt a little lightheaded myself. My leg did feel better in the water, the ache in my hip easing a little with the warm heat and whatever salts were mixed in the springs. He won't get dragon riders, except for me. The Dominar would never allow that. We, alone of the nations, ride the skies and the Dominar would never allow otherwise. I shifted, uncomfortably. What, you know something, Amel? Some of our dragons have been taken already. The Magickas who were with me stole them. I told her the story, sparing no details. She sat in silence when I had finished, a line of worry in the middle of her forehead, her expression knotted like she was thinking through a problem. It's unbelievable, she said eventually, motioning for me to eat. I helped myself to fruit and bread. It's true. She looked for a long time at me as I ate, like she was trying to decide whether to believe me. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you have more enemies than you think. She laughed bitterly. Even my friends are enemies now, Amel. I only came to you because I know you have no connections, no friends but me, and no allies. I know that sounds harsh, and I guess I'm sorry, but we both know it's true. You're the only person I can trust not to use this somehow. I twisted my hands together nervously under the water. I was told not to tell anyone, including you. Maybe you shouldn't trust me, Savette. Or maybe that is why I should trust you. I need your help, Amel. Not just for me, although, oh sweet skies, I need it. But to prevent war and save innocent lives. We need to figure out what is going on with the Magickas and the Prince of Baojang, and if it is what you say, we need to figure out what to do about it. She paused for long enough that her eyes had time to grow glassy with tears again. She seemed desperate. Are you with me, Amel? I nodded, swallowing to try to wet my throat. It was dry as sand. She grasped my hand under the water in a tight clasp. I need you to say it. I'm with you. Now that I'd said it, I knew there would be no going back. Chapter 14. Savette snuck me back to my rooms a few hours later and I hobbled in to find the other girls in my knot sorting through a chest of fabric. Amel, where have you been? Artist dropped the cloth she was holding and hurried over to me, hands on her hips. We did so well in practice and then you just disappeared. I had to make up an excuse for Grandis Elfar. The rest of us have been practicing etiquette, Lenora said from where she was running her hands over an ivory cloth. Not that we need the practice. If you fail that, you'll wash out of dragon school and then we won't have to pick our own dresses for the welcome gala. You can pick them for us, and alter them and dress our hair while you're at it. Artist stared at Lenora before turning back to Amel. I know that it's hard for you, but that's no excuse to think that the rules don't apply. I won't make excuses again. Do you understand? Yes, Artist, I said contritely. Were you upset about something? Did you struggle with something in the formation? You held your place just fine. Should I tell her about Savette? No, Savette hadn't sworn me to secrecy, but I'd told her things I wasn't supposed to tell. It felt right to keep our friendship or alliance or whatever it was a secret. I don't understand the hand signals. After all, I needed to know those and they were a convenient excuse. Artist clapped her hand over her mouth and Aura began to laugh from her place beside the chest. She made a few hand signals to her twin who joined in the laughter. I felt my face growing hot. What were they saying about me? I didn't think of that. Artist said, her voice muffled by her hand. Stop covering your mouth, Lenora said from where she was sitting. It's a bad habit. The rest of us managed to confess our failings with our hands at our sides like human beings. I'm taking the rose silk. I think it will suit my complexion. I'll be back in a moment. She sauntered over to a painted silk screen, similar to the one in Savette's room but simpler in design, and disappeared from sight. Artist's hand fell from her mouth. I'm sorry, it's something that they teach you as soon as you learn flying formations, but you haven't learned that yet, have you? It's amazing that we didn't lose you out there, and the prince could arrive any day. We have to be perfect. She paused like she was waiting for input so I nodded gravely, hoping it would mollify her. We'll start drilling you immediately. Maybe she should at least choose a dress first, Ola said with a smirk for her twin. Oh, yes, a dress. Grandis Elfar only left us the chest for 1 hour. Come on over and choose one, Amel. They're on loan from the High Castellan and we have to give them back when we're done, but we can't go to the prince's gala in Dragon Rider leathers. Why not? After all, we were Dragon Riders. Would the military men be in out of uniform, too? They aren't bad, Lenora said, stepping out from behind the screen in the rose silk. It suited her, which made sense since she was born noble. Her gait was graceful and the dress seemed to flow along like water over ground. You look pretty in pink, Aura said, pulling a bright orange dress from the chest. Soft colors are fashionable right now, Lenora said with a frown. Her rose dress had a soft, flowing skirt, but the bodice was completely made of rose lace. It suited her thick black braid. I like orange, Aura said, stripping off her leathers in the middle of the room to try the dress on. Ola had a turquoise-colored dress out and she was inspecting the length of the skirt. Artist spun a soft green silk this way and that under her critical eye. There were too many eyes on me to make a good decision. When it was my turn, I reached into the chest and pulled out the first one that I found, a filmy cream dress with a long flowing skirt and a high lace neck that went right up to my collarbone. It had no sleeves, which was fortunate because it should make using my crutch easier. That's a good choice, Ola said from where she was modeling her turquoise dress. It looked stunning with her long blonde hair. She'd unraveled it from her braid to check it against the dress. Go try it on. For the second time that day, I found myself behind a silk screen putting on clothing that didn't belong to me. When I hobbled out, Artis was twirling in her green dress. Her red hair looked richer against the dullness of the green. That looks perfect, Ola said. Cream is a good color for you, Amel. Maybe we can find a matching ribbon for the crutch, Lenora said, and I felt my face color once again. I wasn't made for pretty dresses or galas. Oh, hush, she's one of us now, Artis said, her tone distracted as she turned side to side in the mirror. She's a cripple, Lenora said, as if anyone hadn't realized that by now. She sits a dragon just fine, Aura said, stripping off her orange dress, clearly as anxious as I was to get back into her leathers. And that's all I want from a fellow dragon rider. That and responsiveness in a formation, Aura agreed, joining her sister. Now we just need to work on the signals. Lenora rolled her eyes, but I noticed that after the dresses were all hung neatly by our beds that she was the first one to sit on the edge of my bed and start demonstrating signs. They drilled me all afternoon and most of the evening, refusing to answer my questions or even pass the food at dinner if I didn't ask with hand signals. I was still struggling with them, but I'd learned the major ones. A loop motion, rolling one forearm around the other, meant, again. A circle made with one forefinger meant, follow. Fingers tapped on the forearm called out the designated numbers of different group formations. The girls taught me the most popular ones but kept to just 6 to keep from confusing me. A tap to the forehead was a yes. A tap to the shoulder a no. And on and on and on until eventually, I was so tired that someone laughed and I blinked when I found someone else had pulled a blanket over me, but I didn't sign a question, one finger to an ear. Instead, I simply fell into the sweet embrace of sleep. Chapter 15. Get up, get up. Arta's voice sounded panicked as she raced from one of us to the other, shaking us in the pre-dawn darkness. A candle guttered in the holder she carried as she rushed between us. I sat up, massaging my leg. Spears of pain shot through my hip. I hadn't taken care to prop it up well when I fell asleep last night. I yawned and almost laughed as Aura fended Artis off with a fluffy pillow. Leave me alone, she wailed. It's too early. They spotted a light on the horizon. It's a ship. The Prince of Baojang arrives with the dawn and we are to fly his escort just like we were promised. We have to be up to the stables and tacking up right away. Lenora was already standing, washing her face with a cloth by a wash basin. How was her braid so perfect when she'd just awoken? Hastily, I combed my own hair out with my fingers, quickly braiding it into a tight, practical rope to keep it out of the way. I needed to hurry. No matter how fast I wouldn't be as fast as the others. I tied the end of my braid tightly, grabbed my crutch, and thanked the heavens I'd fallen asleep fully clothed. Even hurrying and doing only what was strictly necessary to ready myself, I was 3 steps behind everyone else. Ola and Aura flew out of the room before I'd even had a turn in the washroom in the back. Lenora was only a few steps behind them, looking fresh and clean as a summer daisy. Artis tucked a last strand of unruly hair into a headband as I was hobbling out. I was clean, respectable and ready to ride, but falling behind by the moment. She looked torn, glancing between me and the door. Just go, I said. I'll catch up. She nodded briskly and ran. As always, I was left to bring up the rear. I hobbled through the darkness, hip twinging with the cold of the morning, leg dragging uselessly as I pulled myself along step by step. I knew the route, could see some of the others up ahead. If only I could run. If only I could speed away and show everyone how committed I was to this and that I was ambitious, too. It was just so hard to be ambitious when you knew that your all would never be as much as their average. Still, I pushed myself. Footsteps echoed behind me. The streets were mostly clear, and I wondered who was hurrying across the cobblestones. Maybe we weren't the only ones rested from our beds to prepare for the coming prince. They drew closer, but I couldn't spare the time to spin around and look. I needed to focus every effort on getting to the stables in time. What if they flew without me? Would that mean that I didn't pass formations and was thrown out of school? The footsteps were just behind me and then suddenly a figure pulled up beside me, his pace matching mine. I glanced over. Who could it be? Lantern light reflected off Leng's shaven head. He smiled at me, his eyes warm in the half-light of dawn that was creeping over the horizon. Ready to ride? He asked. Yes, I said, feeling desperate inside at the need to hurry and yet trying not to show it to Leng. What would he think if he knew it was all I could do to pull in at the back of the line? I hear your knot is flying the honor escort. I nodded, shy of him with so much uncertainty between us. I'm proud of you. That's a great honor. You will do our color very proud, Amel Leafbrought. He seemed shy and I glanced up to see a gentle smile on his lips. He leaned towards me and then seemed to catch himself, drawing in a quick breath and then saying, I want you to know that I will deal with matters when the prince arrives. You don't need to say anything to him or about him, or his companions. Understand, you need to remain silent. Oh, he was only here to remind me not to talk. I couldn't help the sinking feeling inside. I had hoped, well, maybe I was reading things into the situation. I had almost thought that he was growing fond of me. I needed to stop getting my hopes up where he was concerned. I understand, I said, bravely, fighting the searing disappointment inside. Good, he said with a smile, and then he seemed uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure what to say next. He stopped walking, but I couldn't stop with him. I was already well behind. He jogged up to join me again and grabbed my arm. Amel, can you stop for a moment? I stopped, frustration and anxiety warring within me at the delay. I don't know how to say this, he said, looking timid. I wanted to make him feel better, but I really needed to get to the stable. Didn't he realize that? Didn't he see I was already at a disadvantage? I swallowed my selfish desire. I needed to be a good friend, not an amazing dragon rider. I drew in a deep breath. Whatever he was going to say must be important. I would pay him the respect of listening. Go ahead and tell me, Leng. I forced a smile. Show kindness, Amel. Everything isn't always about you. I don't want to insult you, but it's still a long way to the stables. And longer by the minute. I forced myself to breathe evenly and really listen to him. Would you be offended if I offered to carry you? I think we could go a lot quicker. I almost sobbed with relief. Yes, please. Oh, thank you, Leng. I'm so far behind. He signaled with his hand, and from the shadows, the massive form of Alskibi descended onto the cobbles in front of us. He motioned to his dragon. Hop on, we'll get you to Raolcan. My smile was genuine as he helped me on his dragon's back. Maybe he just wanted to protect me. Could that be why he was acting so harsh? Chapter 16. He carried you. That's my job. Raolcan was far too bothered about that when we had an honor to perform. I scrambled across to his saddle, throwing it over my shoulder with one hand while my other arm worked the crutch back to where he was. I threw it over his shoulders and waited until he kindly lifted a leg, making space for me to crouch low and tighten his girth. Was that too tight? Cinch it just a little tighter. I complied, hooking the halter and reins around his head. There was no bit and I didn't tighten these at all, letting them hang loosely around his face so that he still had enough space to open his jaws all the way. It wasn't like I was going to steer him, but all the other dragon riders used them and I didn't want anyone to ask questions. Leng doesn't tighten Alskibis either. I bet he takes the bit out. The relationship between purples and their humans is different. I was just mounting Raolcan, tucking my crutch into the side strap and breathing hard, when Aura peeked her head inside the alcove. Ready? She asked, cheeks flushed and excitement dancing in her eyes. I nodded. Great, you follow me in the formation. Lenora brings up the rear. Remember your signals and stay in tight. You'll do great. She was gone in a flash, not even waiting to see if I'd acknowledged her. Just like her dragon, all those greens are the same. It's the feeling of flying, the joy of the chase, the excitement of the unknown, it's all physical for them. Well, just flying in your mind didn't really count, did it? Of course, it was physical. I watched Artis drop from her perch, her dragon Senioso spinning in his somersault. My belly clenched knowing my turn was coming. The twins and their emerald dragons, Neojue and Iame were next. I felt Raolcan moving into position as my breath came quicker. For purples, flying is so much more, he said as he dropped. My stomach felt like it was dropping through my mouth and then we were hurtling forward behind Aura and her dual light green dragon in the glorious gold and pale blue of dawn. I thought I heard someone whoop as Artis tapped her arm with 2 fingers and we settled into formation. Now that we were so high, I could finally see the ship out in the ocean, sailing toward the Ruby Isles. Surprisingly, she wasn't alone. At least a dozen yellow-sailed ships were laid out in a formation like ours, the sea foaming and cresting wherever it met the bow of one of them. Where had those vessels been when I met Prince Rakturan on the island? He'd been on a single ship then. Had these others caught up to him later? It made seeing him there even more suspicious. What had he been doing so far south? If only I knew the kinds of things Savette did about the inner workings of the Dominion, maybe I'd have answers to these questions. Maybe it's a good thing that I do all the real work out here. You daydream too much to fly a dragon. Maybe he should just be glad he didn't have a novice rider soaring at his mouth and overriding his free will. Oh, trust me, I am. Why do you think I picked you? Because I'm no trouble. Because you're a dreamer, and to me, your dreams taste like molten honey. Imagine how that would scald your mouth. Not my mouth. It's my favorite treat. If you come across some, please save a little for me. I'd have to see if there was any honey around. Perhaps I could make it hot somehow, in a pot. Would that be molten? Good girl. We received the signal from Artis and our formation slid into a V shape. When the ships were beneath us, we spread out wider, and with hand signals, Artis led us into a group barrel roll. We followed it with a circular formation, spreading wide and fanning out until at the last moment Senius dove from his place at the apex and burst through the very center of our rotating circle. Artis' red hair broke free of her headband, flowing through the air like a flame in the night. Below us, on the ships, sailors waved and warriors brandished weapons in what seemed to be more celebration than a threat. They were impressive in their strange garments and solemn looks, and yet there was something about them that seemed very foreign. I'd never been very far from home. My parents had thought that best, not that they had any option with the little we had. I had already traveled further than any of them were ever likely to go. How strange that I was flying over a foreign prince on his way to marry my friend. We continued our forms as we escorted them into port. Good thing Raolcan knew what he was doing, because Artis seemed to have forgotten that I was brand new at this as she rolled from one complicated maneuver into another. At least I knew enough of the hand signs to be able to anticipate what Raolcan was about to do so that it didn't come as a shock. On shore, a mass of people had been gathered, and even from here I could see that the streets had been strewn with flowers, the asheven poles wreathed with them, and people lined the narrow, winding roads all the way to the shining white palace on the hills. Tonight, we would gather in that palace in our borrowed dresses to greet the prince. I hoped that everything I believed about him wasn't true. Chapter 17. Tell me if anything is out of place, Amel. Ola said, whirling in place. She was perfect, her hair and dress shining in the light of the candles and her shoes perfectly matching. Wait, shoes. I didn't have shoes. My hand sprang to my mouth. Why hadn't I thought of shoes? Don't tell me it's that bad. She looked horrified. No, of course not. I gasped. You look perfect. I just realized that I'm wearing dragon rider boots. I don't have shoes for this. I lifted the edge of my perfect cream lace and silk dress to reveal my knee-high dragon rider boots. Why hadn't I even thought about it when I put them on? Of course, boots didn't go with a dress. I'd just never worn a dress like this before. I hadn't even thought about anything that I would need to go with it. Lenora marched over and looked me up and down. We were in our quarters preparing for the gala where Savette would be presented to Prince Raolcan. I wondered how nervous she was right now, dressing and preparing just like us but with so much more at stake. The dress is long, Lenora said, her expression firm. And you can't easily hobble on a crutch and court shoes. You'll end up breaking the other leg and I'm certainly not going to carry you. Boots are more practical. No one will see them under the long dress. Just don't dance with anyone. Well, that would be easy enough. With a crutch, I wouldn't dare dance. I'd trip or fall or have to be carried, and any of those things would be utterly humiliating. Are all of you ready? Grandis Elfar bustled into the room, shocking me with her appearance. I knew, objectively, that she was a woman, despite the weathered skin, shorn hair and sturdy clothing, but it still felt very strange to see her in a dress. She had chosen a black dress that covered her from shin to toes, but even so, it felt strangely feminine for someone like her. You did us proud today, initiates. You held up the honor of Dragon School. Tonight, when the Reds fly and show us a fire display, you can watch them knowing that you did just as well as they and that you all passed your maneuvers. Enjoy yourselves. Keep an eye on each other. Stay out of trouble. We didn't have nearly the time we needed to teach you etiquette, but do your best to keep up the dignity of Dragon School. We have much more to learn together. She smiled at us and then led the way out of our rooms and building and onto the crowded street where a steady flow of people moved toward the palace. For once, I wasn't trailing behind everyone else. No one could go very quickly in the press of bodies. Unbidden, the memory of being carried on Alskibi's back that morning came to mind. Leng had been so shy about offering, but in the end, he'd saved me. I wouldn't have passed maneuvers if he hadn't brought me there in time. The excitement around us as we headed for the gala was palpable. "Did you see him?" I heard one girl ask. She was clearly of importance, dressed in a filmy blue sky silk dress. I caught a glimpse as he was disembarking. "So good looking. And tall," an older woman, likely her mother, agreed. "Tall and strong is good in a king. It lets people know they can't be bullied." If there was one adjective I would use for Raolcan, it was not bullied. With similar positive comments and excited chatter all around us, it was hard to keep from growing nervous. What if Savette ended up changing her mind about him when she met him and saw how attractive he was? What if she disregarded my warnings? What if Leng hadn't taken him seriously? I was so busy worrying that we'd made it all the way to the palace gates and into the flower-filled courtyard before I realized it. Grandis Elfar disappeared into the crowd, leaving us in the milling crowd. There were fires and punch in the courtyard, and artists handed out invitation cards to us. "You'll need these to get into the Great Hall. Only Castellans or High Castellans get into the inner tier, so don't bother. Except for you, of course, Lenora." I took mine with good grace. I didn't care about being in an inner tier, but Aura and Ola exchanged disappointed looks. "Don't worry, there is plenty of dancing in the Great Hall," Artis said. "Or so Lenora tells me. I've never been to one of these." "You'll be fine," Lenora said absently, patting Artis on the arm before flowing gracefully into the crowd and taking the arm of a well-dressed young man about our age. "That must be High Castellan Yildiz Huntel," Artis said. Lenora was waiting for him. She was waiting for someone named Yildiz. Perhaps the Castellans should think about what names they give the children so that they don't sound ridiculous. Ola said. Artis shushed her, but her heart wasn't into it. We moved as a group to the gates, where a man dressed in livery took our cards and allowed us into the gardens. Beyond them was the Great Hall, but here in the moonlight on the cliffs beside the sea, the gardens had more appeal for me. "Come on, Amel," Artis said as she hurried toward the hall. "Go on without me, Artis. I'm going to take a break here." She looked torn, so I repeated myself. "Really, go on, I'll be fine." She left in a flurry of people, Ola and Aura in her wake. They would have fun dancing. I'd already seen some of the young men eyeing them in their brightly colored dresses. Where the garden met the terraces of the Great Hall, there was a mass of moving people, but further into the garden, closer to where it met the cliffs above the sea, there was no one. It was like an entirely different place. I wandered from one tree to the next, admiring their smooth white bark and glossy leaves until, under one of them, tucked far in the back, I found a bench. Perfect, exactly what I needed. I took a seat and massaged my sore hip. I'd certainly been giving it a workout lately. But that was nothing to worry about. In time, I would adapt and adjust and grow stronger, and for now, there was this handy bench and a gorgeous moon to look at. Towards the palace, I heard a bush rustling and then two figures stepped out, plain and easy to see in the bright moonlight. They looked around and I realized they couldn't see me sitting here behind the leafy tree. One of them was Starry Atrellan. Chapter 18. "Be quiet," Starry hissed. "Someone might hear us. Out here." That was Corrigan's voice. "While all the important people are inside meeting your dashing prince and the commoners in the courtyard are getting drunk. No one would be in the gardens on a night like tonight. No one except a girl with a bad leg and a sore hip who needed a moment to stop and rest. No one but me. We need to find Savette Leadress and bring her out here to the garden," Starry said. She was peering into every bush, sure she was being watched. I held very still. "Correction. I need to find Savette Leadress. You need to find the Grandis with a bold story of how you washed up here afraid and alone." That was Corrigan's voice. Her silhouette moved, suddenly, and I heard the sound of a slap. "What was that for?" Starry's voice was high with surprise. "You're supposed to look distraught, not like the fox who ate the chickens. I thought I'd give you a hand with the fake tears. They won't look so fake now. It hurts." "Listen," Corrigan sounded impatient. "We only have until 10th bell and you can already hear the singers of 9th bell. Go inside and see if you can find your Grandis. You need to make her believe you before the action starts." "Yes." Corrigan's voice softened. "I'm going to miss you. Don't forget, this is for honor." My heart was hammering. I needed to get to Savette and warn her about Corrigan. But how? Any movement right now would draw their notice. Worse, I had no idea what Corrigan was planning. "I won't forget," Starry sounded sad. Had they become friends? They were moving toward the terrace, despite Starry's objection. I stood up, cautiously, reminding myself to stay tucked in the shadow of the tree. I adjusted my grip on my crutch and limped off further into the bushes. My heart was beating so quickly that I had to take a moment to remind myself to breathe. No one could help Savette if I was passed out on the ground somewhere. I found another terrace door a little way down the garden and snuck through the entrance to the throng inside. I'd never been somewhere so opulent before. It made Dragon School appear Spartan. The room was richly decorated with hanging tapestries. Richly embroidered silk bearing the images of dragons of various color, and a complicated silver knot made of 2 dragons' tails tied together was hung in swaths all around the room. The hall was large enough to hold my entire village. I gaped as I looked down from the stairway to the sunken ballroom below. An orchestra played, the man-high drums and long slender wind instruments predominating in the current piece, producing a rumbling boom-bar music. On the sunken dance floor, couples engaged in a hip-swinging energetic dance that I would never be able to imitate in 1,000 years. Just thinking of trying to cross that dance floor without tripping a dozen dances with my crutch made me flinch. Around the dance floor were terraced levels with drinks, food and seating, and various people who were opting not to dance congregated at each level, talking with heads close together or gesturing with drinks in a way that had little compassion for the servants who would have to clean up afterward. My eyes fell on Savette almost immediately. She wore a heavily embroidered, scarlet sky silk dress with a high collar that came up to her cheekbones and cut sharply to the back. The bodice was designed so that it looked more like battle armor than a lady's dress, but the skirt was nearly transparent and so filmy that it left little to the imagination. Fortunately, the armor-like bodice came down in heavy protection to a few inches past the hips, just enough for decency. Dressed in such a fashion, she looked like a goddess. Beside her, Prince Raolcan was smiling at an elderly man in military uniform. Raolcan, true to form, had the exotic look of a carapaced insect. His jacket a bottle green, but cut in such a foreign way that it was impossible for me to tell if it was fashionable or a uniform of its own. It left his forearms exposed, and intricate red and black tattoos covered them entirely and snaked down the backs of his hands. On his head, the strange upside-down crown he'd worn before was burnished to brightness. They stood together with the elderly man and a woman who appeared to be his wife, on a platform a step above the terraced floors, where all the other levels could see them. One level beneath them, a variety of well-dressed people with haughty looks made short remarks to one another and studied the crowd. That must be the tier 1 wasn't granted access to. Raolcan's own men mixed among them. They must be the High Castellans, only one step below the Dominar in their importance. Likely, the elderly man was the High Castellan of the Ruby Isles himself. I scanned the crowd, not seeing any of my not, although I did spot Grandis Elfar chatting to a woman of a similar age. Through the crowd, a flushed Starry in a peach-colored dress pushed toward the Grandis. Across the room I saw Corrigan, her gaze fixed on Savette and a frown on her face. She had the same problem I did. How would we get up on the dais? Only Raolcan, Savette and the High Castellans of the Isles were allowed there, and the people beneath them looked like they would snap the heads off anyone else who tried. I was no High Castellan. I wouldn't even be able to get to that lower level. I needed a plan. If only I was a dragon who could fly where no one else could go. I watched idly as a servant climbed up the levels of the dais, tray in hand, distributing drinks. There was something familiar about her, something I couldn't quite place. She ascended all the way to the top, offering Savette a drink from her tray. Savette took it, but her hardened expression was locked on the prince as if he was going to marry her by force this very night. Maybe he was. What did I know about these things? Maybe if I asked one of the servants, they could deliver a message to her. I followed the servant girl with my gaze and noticed the discreet cart at one end of the room, filled with drinks and food. She was headed back there to restock. And then all of a sudden, I realized why she looked so familiar. With her plain white dress, her hair braided behind her and a sturdy pair of black shoes on her feet, she was dressed almost exactly the same as I was. Chapter 19. I didn't have time to lose, so I hustled over to the cart, crutch slipping slightly on the polished marble floor. I'd need to be careful. I timed my arrival to get there just as another servant was leaving. Would they question me when I took a tray of appetizers? No one had seen. The appetizers were lighter and easier to maneuver than drinks were, but how would I avoid notice? My crutch drew eyes. I followed a girl with a wide skirt who was heading in the direction I wanted to go and shadowed her. If I could just follow people, then maybe I wouldn't draw as much notice as I would if I was cutting a path through the crowds myself. Before long, I'd made it to the tier below Savette. I'd lost track of where Starry and Corrigan had gone, but if I worried about them, then I wouldn't be able to focus on my own task. I stopped to serve two women who held their chins so high that they had to peer down the noses at me. I kept my eyes low like I imagined a servant would. I wasn't from a noble family, but I wasn't from a servant family either, and I had no idea how I should act as one except to serve the food and be humble. It was taking me too long to make my way to Savette. Every stop felt like an eternity. Every moment that someone stepped in my path and I had to veer around them was a moment lost. I had to fight against impatience and anxiety. Hold the course, Amel. A formidable woman in a blue dress almost as armored-looking as Savette stopped in front of me. Now what are in these puffs? I hope they don't have mushrooms in them. No ma'am, I said. Savette turned on the dais, the prince taking her hand as if he would lead her to the dance floor. No, I needed to get to her now. I tried to move out of the woman's path, but her face turned sour as she bit into the appetizer. It is mushrooms, she said, loudly enough that people turned to look at us. You lied to me. I want to talk to your supervisor. I swallowed. What did I do now? Savette was stepping down to the tier below. Was that Corrigan I saw in the crowd nearby? There was nothing for it. If people noticed me, then they noticed. I shoved the tray in the sputtering lady's hands. I'm sure you'll be much better at this than I am. I hurried after Savette, but she wasn't headed for the dance floor, she was being led toward the garden terrace by Prince Raolcan. He was playing right into the magic's hands. Savette, I called as the gap between us widened. I was too slow. I wasn't going to make to her in time. She didn't turn, likely didn't hear me, but I felt a hand grab my upper arm, pulling me to a dead stop. Chapter 20. I whipped my head around to see Leng, dressed in full dragon rider regalia, a fancy leather coat with a high collar, complete with tight belts around his chest, waist, and thighs. He must have been attending the party. He looked deadly. Savette is in trouble, I said. He wouldn't ask me to prove it, would he? I had no proof, but why was he holding me back? I'll deal with this. I clenched my jaw. I was not a child to be set aside when a friend needed help. People always thought I couldn't do what was needed because of my leg, but that just wasn't true. I pushed his hand gently from my arm and headed toward the terrace. Leng made a sound of frustration in his throat and then leapt in front of me, seized my crutch and wrenched it from my grip. It's for your own safety. Why are you always in the thick of danger when all I want to do is keep you safe? He was running through the door, crutch in hand while I was standing there, wobbling, on one foot. I couldn't go far unless I resorted to crawling and I certainly wasn't going to get far on all fours in this dress. I felt tears of frustration welling up. If I focused, perhaps I could hop on one foot to the door, dragging my other leg. I clenched my jaw and concentrated. Hop. Hop. I lost sight of Leng as he rushed through the door. Behind us, the party continued as if nothing was happening. Why was he so focused on protecting me? I didn't want to live life as an invalid. I wanted to live it as an adventurer. Hop. What's happening? Raolcan was picking up on something going on. How could he reach me from so far away? Our bond is unique. Don't ask questions. Give answers. Leng had stolen my crutch and I couldn't see. There, the door. At last, I grabbed the frame, steadying myself and letting my gaze wander over the terraces below. My mouth dropped as I took it all in. Leng was still running down the steps, while Savette was in the center of the courtyard arguing with a gesturing Prince Raolcan. He had her arm in an iron grip. I couldn't hear her words, but her eyes were wide and her face flushed. It looked more like a lover's quarrel than something nefarious. Above her, hard to discern in the darkness, dragons were approaching. Were those Corrigan's friends? How did they arrive without the dragon riders on watch sounding an alert? I gripped the doorframe tightly. Could Raolcan get here in time to help? I can't. They bind trainee dragons. They don't trust us not to leave without permission. If only my culture wasn't so mistrustful of dragons. If only they treated them with respect. If only. Leng rushed down the steps, calling to Savette and Raolcan and pointing above them. The first dragon descended as he was still explaining. He flung my crutch to one side and barreled into Savette, knocking her to the side and into the leafy plant. The prince snarled but quickly spun away from his intended as a magica fireball exploded between her and the palace where I stood, lighting up the night in brilliant magenta. Fire raged in a pool on the ground after the initial burst let off. Did they hurl some sort of substance at the same time? Guards, I called, dragon riders, warriors, up arms, alert. What about Alskibby? Was he bound like Raolcan? Why didn't Leng call him? They don't have our range. Already I heard a rush of murmurs behind me, but they hadn't penetrated far enough in the party to stop the music or loud burbling of voices. Can you ask him for help, Raolcan? I bit my lip, feeling helpless in the face of the battle and the peril to my friend. Guards poured in from the garden side of the terrace, but once they arrived they looked confused. Leng squatted over Savette, one hand motioning her to be still while the other held up a drawn dagger. Beside him, Raolcan held his own sword up, his back to Leng. Dragons circled above them, and then another swooped down, magica fireballs filling the space between the arriving guards and the fallen High Castellan. Alskibby comes. Good, we needed him. Maybe if Leng had him help, he could chase the magicas off. Had they planned to tip their hand this way? It seemed like a very showy way to dispose of her if they planned to replace her with Starry. I see you're in your proper place, Blighted. I spun to see Corrigan smiling at me as she rushed by. She took the time to give me a jaunty wave with her fingers, like I was a little kid left behind while everyone else went off on an important trip. She rushed down the steps, straight through the angry trail of fire as if nothing could harm her and ran up to Savette, grabbing her under each arm and helping her up. Leng lent a hand, clearly not understanding this was a foe and not a friend. Raolcan stood with his back to them, sword brandished high as if he could hold off a full-grown dragon on his own. Don't trust her, I called, but I was too late. Corrigan took a step back with a dazed Savette as if to move her away from the danger. A golden dragon, was that Nenebeth, swooped low with apprentice trade on the back. Beside him, Starry's dragon Estevan dove low and clutched the edge of the cliff, but with no Starry on the back. He flamed and Raolcan dodged out of the way, spinning as he did so and coming up to face the dragon, just feet from its steaming snout. With a cry, he lifted his blade high, his tattoos flaring with purple light, and then he struck. I gasped as Estevan's head was cleaved in half. He crumpled, falling in on himself and then lost his grip on the edge of the cliff, plummeting over the side. I'd never seen a dragon die like that before. They were too powerful to be killed by a single sword stroke, weren't they? Not a Baojang sword. Corrigan shoved Savette into Tread's arms, hitting her hard over the head as she did. Savette slumped into his arms. Corrigan raised a hand and Savette was suddenly trussed in glowing rings of fire. Leng rushed towards her, seeming to be in slow motion as Nenebeth leapt into the air. He crashed into Corrigan, bowling her over and knocking a fireball loose from her hand. And continued his run to the edge of the cliff, leaping out from it and seeming to hang in the air for a fraction of a second before his hand grabbed one of Nenebeth's stirrups and he hung, dangling from the leather like a fish caught by an eagle. Corrigan's loose fireball shot upward, lighting the night sky with an eerie magenta glow. In the afterlight of it, I saw three things. The first was Nenebeth soaring ever higher into the open sky, Leng hanging from his stirrup. The second was Prince Raolcan hitting Corrigan hard on the temple with the handle of his dagger, watching her body fall to the ground with a blank expression on his face. The third was Alskibby swooping in for a landing. Chapter 21. Anyone who wasn't staring at Leng and Savette was running and leaping from where I was, trying to avoid Alskibby's mass as he dove to the ground, landing in a controlled skid across the garden terrace. He hissed. His voice entered my mind so fast and hard that I flinched. Mount, now. I wouldn't have ignored him. I knew Leng was in trouble. I could see him out there, fighting while Trade tried to kick him off the stirrup. His muscles bunched and he pulled himself a little higher. I let go of the doorframe and single-leg jumped towards Alskibby, crashing into him, but close enough that I could scramble, awkwardly onto his back. My leg wouldn't go over, the dress was too tight. I clenched my jaw, grabbed the seam of the dress at the side and tore it up to my thigh. Much better. I scrambled onto his back. There was no saddle. My hands grew clammy and my belly felt weak. I'd never ridden without a saddle, and I'd never ridden any dragon but Raolcan. I didn't trust him. He wasn't my dragon. I'll gut him if he drops you. I'll flame his eyes to dust. Well, that seemed like an overreaction. I settled into his back, gripping the spikes along his neck with my hands. I couldn't grip with my knees like they said horsemen did. Only one of my knees worked. Stop, sweating. Easier said than done, but now Leng was fighting Trade up on the saddle, and in the faint moonlight I thought I saw blows being exchanged. Savette, tied helplessly to the saddle, could do nothing but watch, but if I was courageous, I could do more than that. Alskibi launched into the air and I clenched my eyes tight, trying not to scream. I didn't know if I'd succeeded or not. I was screaming inside, that was for sure. I forced my eyes open. We were out over the ocean. 3 other dragons fanning out ahead of us. Hectorus on a nearby dragon. I didn't know the leader in the front. They'd taken us by surprise. Although, if they didn't leave quickly, the High Castellan's guard dragons would be here before they could. Alskibi was gaining on the pack. He knew what he was doing. Leng struck Trade and he slumped to the side while Leng scrambled into the saddle. He was taking over Nenebeth. He was going to save Savette all on his own. Poor Nenebeth. He didn't want this, and his rider was dead. He was probably heartbroken. Goldens aren't like that. They don't bond like we do. It was nice to have Raolcan still speaking to me even though I was riding Alskibi. Trade stirred, suddenly. Leng's attention was focused forward and he didn't see the move. Leng, I called, but my words were lost in the wind. Trade's hand shot up, lit with orange fire, and he flung it at Leng. Leng cried out, losing his balance and falling from the saddle at the same moment that Trade surged up and in the wake of the fireball, seized the reins and pulled Nenebeth upward. We had only a moment. We were close enough that we could reach Savette and save her, but we were also the only ones close enough to save the plummeting Leng. I knew what we would do before Alskibi dove, and I didn't blame him. It was the decision I would have made, but I still felt a pang of guilt as my gaze connected with Savette's panicked one. I'd been too late, again. Alskibi dropped like a stone until we were lower than Leng. He twisted to the side, swerving to line up under him. I reached my arm out, the other gripping his neck spike. As Alskibi lined us up with Leng's speed and height, I caught his reaching hands with mine and pulled him in so that he landed on Alskibi's back behind me. As we leveled off, I heard his voice in my ear. I thought I could save her. I thought it would be safer for you if I did it on my own. Perhaps he should have left the decision up to me. I bit my own tongue. The other dragons were too far away to catch, although Alskibi was trying. They were small and growing smaller as they caught the drafts of winds further out over the sea. We would try, and fail, to catch them. I already knew that, and they would carry Savette far away and we would never find her again. I watched as the guard dragons, finally alerted to what was happening in their midst, swept towards them. The gap was too far. I patted Alskibi's side, knowing he was still chasing them for my sake. It was too late. Had to try. I was grateful to Alskibi for that. He'd done it for me. I hadn't expected that kind of kindness from him. We watched as the tiny dragons became pinpricks in the night, still watching as most of the guard dragons returned, empty-handed to their posts. We were too late. Somewhere, out in the night, Savette was tied with magic to the back of a dragon. By morning, she would be far away. In a week, she could be anywhere. She'd seen me as an ally and I'd let her down. I sniffled, not even trying to hold back my tears. Don't worry, Spider. I will never let your heart break. Not over anything. We will find your friend. How were we going to find her now? They weren't going to let me out to look on my own. They didn't even listen when I told them there was a threat. Trust me, we will find a way. Alskibi landed on a dock at the edge of the city. It was dark and lonely with only the faraway lights to indicate that there were people here. I dismounted with a sigh. Why was Leng looking at me so strangely? The dress, it left most of my leg exposed. I felt my cheeks heat, but I didn't have time to think of the embarrassment of that. It was going to be a long way back to the center of the city for a girl who had her crutch stolen. Leng dismounted beside me, but I didn't look at him. I was frustrated with him and I didn't want to tell him that I was. If I did, it would just make me more vulnerable. I hobbled forward, holding Alskibi with one hand for balance. Amel, Leng said, his voice rough with some sort of emotion. I hoped it was repentance. He had treated me badly back there. I kept walking, sort of. Amel, please stop. I stopped, but I didn't turn. I kept my face towards the city ahead of me, with the moon at my back. My shadow was before me. The dock was narrow and Leng had to squeeze by me as he passed. I couldn't help the little shiver that ran through me as his arm brushed mine on the way past. He got in front of me and looked me in the eyes, his face lit by the moon behind me. He licked his lips nervously, his breath gusting between them quickly. I shouldn't have taken your crutch. I didn't know what to say. Obviously, he shouldn't have. Saying that sounded cruel, but I wasn't ready to forgive him yet. He ran a hand over his face, closing his eyes for a moment before speaking again. I shouldn't have tried to do everything myself. Savette is gone because you were all so certain that I'd just get in the way. She's stolen away and I wasn't there to help her. There should have been guards. There should have been precautions taken. This shouldn't have happened. You all should have listened to me and not brushed me off just because I'm a cripple. He gasped. I didn't mean it like that. I don't treat you gently because of your leg. I'm not going to break. Just because I broke before doesn't mean that I'm fragile. I couldn't help the vulnerable tone of my voice. I didn't like talking about my leg. I didn't like having to admit that it made me seem fragile. His eyes were wide with gentleness as he said, I think I understand. It won't happen again. I'm so sorry. If you want me to be your friend, then you need to respect me and trust me. My lips were trembling now. I didn't want to cry in front of him, but it was just so unfair. If I was whole, he never would have treated me like this. I do respect you. I'm not sure there's another human who impresses me as much as you do. He reached up and brushed a stray hair from my face, tucking it behind my ear and his lips parting before his face took on a tight expression and his hand fell back to his side. He always seemed so cold whenever I got close. He'd be warm and then freezing cold. I gasped at the suddenness of it. I'd better get you back to your quarters, he said, dipping his head respectfully like I was a high castellan. I bit my lip, feeling like there should be more, like he wanted to say more but couldn't. But what could I do about that? His heart was his own and any feelings it held were his secrets alone to share. As we remounted Alskibby and he flew me back to my rooms, I wondered where Savette was. How long would it be before I saw her again? Would we find her before her kidnappers did something more than simply take her away? I chewed worriedly at my lip. We landed outside my quarters and Leng helped me down. I'll take care of this, Amel. Alskibby and I will find your friend, Leng said, his face serious in the lantern light. I smiled, half-heartedly and nodded, turning to leave, but he spun me around, his expression torn with pain and something else, something I couldn't identify. He gripped my shoulders, drawing me to him with a combination of gentleness and power I'd never felt before. His kiss on my forehead was butterfly-light and the brightness in his eyes as he pulled back from the kiss burned into my memory. Wordlessly, he scooped me up, carried me to my door. As he set me down, a determined look filled his face and then he kissed me again on the forehead and then leaned down to delicately kiss each cheek. I'm sorry. I forgive you, I said, my voice trembling. What did all the kisses mean? Was it just that he was sorry, or was it something more? Could he feel some of the affection for me that I felt for him? His face filled with determination and then he turned and walked back to Alskibby. I promise that I'll make this right, he said as he remounted, and when he soared up into the sky, I found that I believed him. Continue Amel's story in Dragon School, the Ruby Isles. This concludes the chapters. Show your appreciation by liking this video and subscribe.